Okay, so that's our form. So to go over it again, we have placed this in a function that we can pass information to. We can pass first name, last name, any error messages, and the ID of the record that we're editing. And then we set an h1 tag, we display any errors, and we display the actual form to the user. So let's see how that works at the moment. So if ID is set, let's render the form. And we're going to pass it, I guess it has to be null. Like so. And then if we're not editing anything, let's also display this, except we can leave these blank. Okay, let's save it and preview and see what we have. So I'm going to refresh. So editing, line 22. Oh, I'm sorry. We can't use isSet here. We just need to use if ID, like so. Okay. So we have our edit record, we have the ID of the record that we're editing, which is based on that. We have first name, last name, and a submit button. And let's go back here and let's also add a line break. And that just stylizes things a little bit. Okay, so that's in place, and then if we remove this, we get a new record. And it doesn't show the ID value. Okay, so now let's write the PHP that processes this form. Okay, so we're going to start, this is going to be so this will edit an existing record, and this area here will be creating a new record. So we're going to want to catch if the user has submitted this form, and we do that by checking so if there are items in the post variable, if this form has been submitted, we want to do something. Otherwise, let's display the form to the user. Okay, and briefly to show you this, let's save this and go back here. Let me check. Let's actually pull an actual value. I think that should fix it. There we go. Okay, so we have records.php. Everything's blank. If we submit it, it generates a form submitted message. So we know this section is working. Okay, so if the form is submitted, the first thing we want to do is get the form data. So I'm going to set first name, and I'm going to make sure we validate this data that we grabbed from the form. So we're going to use HTML entities to do that, and we're going to post, and then we also want to set this quotes flag, and that will make sure that we encode everything, that we don't have any issues with SQL injection. So that's the first line. And last name. And then secondly, we're going to want to check to make sure the user entered in information for both first name and last name. So in that case, if first name has no value or last name has no value, we're going to want to display an error message and show the user the form again. So in this case, we're going to add error so that sets the error message, and then we're going to render the form again. And we're going to pass back the data that we just retrieved here. This makes sure that if the user entered in data, he doesn't lose anything when this error message is displayed. Last name, error. Okay, so let's go and test this quickly. Line 57. Sorry about that. Okay. So we have a new record. Let's submit it. And you'll notice we do get our error message, but we also get an undefined variable. So let me check this out quickly. First name. Oh, excuse me. I didn't set this right. Last name. And let's go back and check this. So submit, there we go. So we do get an actual error message here. So back to records. Okay, so if first name and last name have been entered in properly, we want to actually add this data to the database. And we're going to do that by adding in an else. And similarly, like the delete line, we want to do a prepared statement. So similarly, we're going to use the prepare function and insert players, and we're going to pass it first name, last name. So these are the values of the columns, and we're going to pass it the values. And similar to the delete statement that I showed you earlier, we're going to use question marks. Okay, so if this function is successful, we're going to continue. Otherwise, we need to display an error message. Okay, so that's set. So we have our query. Now we want to make sure we bind data that takes the place of these question marks. So we use the bind params, and we're going to want to send it values for these two. And the first item here is we need to tell what type of data these are going to be. So in this case, they're both strings. So SS for 2 strings, and then we're going to pass it in first name and last name. And with the parameters bound properly, we're going to go ahead and execute. So that's commits the query, and then finally we want to close this. Okay, and then so that's all set, and then once we submitted this information, let's go and redirect the user. So it's going to send it back to the view.php page. So I think that looks good for the moment. The last thing that we want to do let's come down here at the bottom and make sure we close out our database connection. And we do that by there we go. So let's go ahead and preview this and make sure it's working properly. Give me one moment here. Okay, sorry about that. I realized a semi-major error here. We need to actually make sure we include the database. So we want to include ConnectDB. Because obviously we can't close the database connection if we didn't open it to start with. So let's go back and check this. There we go. Let's try submitting it with only partial information. Get an error message, and you'll notice that the value that we entered in previously is still there. So test, and there we go. You notice we went back to the view page, and test have been entered into the records. So, and then to repeat what we did just a little bit earlier, we can also delete that record now. So add new record, test, submit. So we're adding records and deleting records successfully using mysqli. So I believe that's going to be it for this section. In the final section, I want to talk about how we go about editing records. We're going to continue on with this particular file, specifically expanding this section here in case the ID is set and we are editing existing records.